Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Teamsters Mobilize General Membership meeting for September. We will be discussing the state of the 2023 UPS contract. All right, our agenda obviously for today, we'll be discussing some of the events that have happened previously and where we are now with the contract and some of how we got here with the contract. We're going to try to keep this to 30 minutes and then have 30 minutes for open discussion where folks can discuss, what's going on with the UPS contract. Here are some ways to get involved with Teamsters Mobilize if you're unfamiliar with us as an organization. But we have a WhatsApp chat that is where we are most active, and there are some of the ways that you can get involved. Here are your steering committee members and your host. We are with all the automations and layoffs and just life in general, we are looking for some members to join our steering committee. If you think you might be interested, reach out to one of us and we'll have a chat. T-shirt order. I know some folks have asked about a Teamster Mobilize shirt. This is our first T-shirt design. The one that we're currently taking for orders for is working class versus ruling class.
Hey everyone. We want to talk a little bit about what has transpired under this historic contract that we're working under. A lot of these issues we foresaw that these things would be problems, and these are just some of the many reasons that we led a vote no campaign and advocated that people vote down this contract. The automation and layoffs, we knew these things were coming. These things were actually in the works prior to COVID, and COVID just kind of threw a wrench in everything, so it was put on hold. We knew that after COVID that these things were going to ramp back up. We already had little to no protections in our contract regarding layoffs and automation. And we knew that we needed to negotiate strong language in order to have some protections against these things. And we made no changes. We negotiated absolutely nothing in regards to layoff and automation. So we have, really all that we have in our contract is that the company and the union have to meet 45 days ahead of any kind of operational changes. We are enforcing that, at least in our local, and we do have stewards be a part of those change of ops meetings. But there's really nothing we can do. We can't stop any of this from happening. We can't stop the layoffs. We can't stop the closures. My center was just closed in June, and we have a lot of people that are driving over an hour now to get to work. The second thing is AC. They touted this as some kind of huge win that they had won AC, when really the language said that package cars after 2024 would be replaced with package cars that have AC in them. I don't know of a single, I'm in Georgia, I don't know of a single package car in our area that has AC, and we're at the end of 2025. So the language surrounding that was very, very weak. We knew that with that language, it would probably take 15 to 20 years for the whole fleet to have AC, which is just a joke with how many people we have dying and suffering from heat exhaustion every single year. A third one, which was huge, especially for the part-timers, they did rid 22-4s from the contract, and they love to say that they abolished tiers. They did not abolish tiers. They in fact added a whole new tier for part-timers that were hired after August of 2023. Every year of this contract, they only receive a 50-cent raise, while those of us that were here prior to the contract are getting 75-cent raises, $1 raise, and I think the last raise that we're going to get is going to be $2 or $2.25. So every single one of those years, those part-timers hired after August 23 will only receive 50 cents. So at the end of the contract, they're going to be about $3.50 behind the rest of us. And that's just awful because with inflation and everything, it's only getting worse. We need more wages, not less wages. And they even called these people the unborn, right? Like we were specifically naming these people the unborn as though they did not matter. And that goes against a union mentality because we are obligated to leave it better than we found it. And we're supposed to have the next person's back before they ever walk through the door. And harassment, micromanagement, retaliation, these things are at an all-time high. The company is doing whatever they want with no regard to the contract. They're even dragging things out longer than they were before when people are wrongfully terminated. In some cases, it's taken people 9 months to get their job back when they never did anything wrong in the first place. That's awful. 9 months without a job, that can put somebody on the streets. That can put somebody, their health, not having health insurance. I mean, that is just detrimental and it's just completely unacceptable. So, these are some of the reasons that we advocated against this contract. And these are things that we need to change in our upcoming contract for the health and the best interests of our members.
Buenos dias, buenas tardes, comrades, wherever you're at. In respects to TDU, we were correct to criticize TDU for telling the class collaboration leadership. Look at what happened at the convention with the resolution in 2024. Removal of Chantal for her UPS article on cosmonauts, a substantial removal of Jess's membership later on, and silent refunds to Kat and Colleen to speed up today. SLB, we were right. We were also very sharp and clear with where SLB's class interest lies. This we pointed this out in the no vote. He was colluding with the government and the company to intentionally cap the strike. Look at where we are now, and immediately following SLB and Trump's marriage, the RNC, other politicians on BBI Better Bad Ideas podcast. His views of immigrations as criminals and continuation of the raids, honor police week, bipartisan bills to some degree with a non-endorsement, really meaning both sides of the aisle. Also supporting and campaigning for now Secretary of Labor. Points out through images of video the start of contrast of what SOB sold out. It's just clear that TDU as an organization did not stand with, the rank and file, because there's many rank and files that are children of immigrants and happen to be immigrants, and their silence on issues of these raids, not denying the resolution on Palestine, shows that this wasn't the TDU of the 1970s that were led by socialists. Now they're just led by people just trying to have a seat at the table. They gave up all their hard fought wins, their ideology, just to have a seat in the table. I think we were clear to call out TDU, and we're still going to call out TDU. TDU leadership, not the TDU rank and file, because there's some good rank and file comrades in TDU, but the leadership has failed the TDU rank and file. I was gonna say we also have a petition out there concerning the TDU ban of TM activists. If you want to check it out, you can go on our socials or on our website, and you'll see it there. And then we also have a petition for Jess when she was removed from TDU membership as well. So you can find those on our social as well.
Okay, hey. I'll build off of Jose because he did start to elaborate the relationship between TDU, and then he already started to expose the issues with Sean O'Brien. And of course, those are related because TDU started as this fighting force against the mobsters, against the corruption. And Jose pointing out the marriage between the two is exactly what was a product of the 2023 contract campaign. Like, this is beyond just did they tail and say that the yes vote was historic. And maybe what I can highlight and leave on here, since we are already talking about both, is that anti-democratic practice. And the slide that is shared, Sean O'Brien called anybody who was critiquing the union a liar, like during the no vote. But you can also see that extended in TDU. aren't we members of this union? Aren't we supposed to give a shit about what goes on, what political stands we take, what we gain in our contracts? And both organizations, both entities, like the international leadership of the Teamsters and TDU, are actively repressing basic things. It's a time-old tale of like anti-communist sentiments, or trying to harp down on militants because we're dreaming of things that are just too far reach. But let's talk about this. What exactly Jess was saying. ACs. People are dying. An unborn tear. This is what we're actively having to oppose. And they'll constantly sort of, I think, smear us as being these big dreamers. But like, let's be real. Look at the stances that you guys took on basic economic struggle as well. But I think the afraid of criticism, both TDU and Sean O'Brien, is a clear parallel.
So all of the previous slides have highlighted that we have a real uphill battle against us, and we are up against powerful forces. Sean O'Brien has openly aligned himself with arguably the top imperialist in the world, Donald Trump, President of the United States, and the whole US government. That can be daunting, especially when we have seen that even in our own contract at UPS, we did have difficulty bringing people on board. The propaganda that the International put out was very strong, and we saw on all of our shop floors and in all of our locals that the local leadership largely fell in line with the top IBT administration and told their members to vote yes on this contract. And ultimately, we are trying to fight to win over larger sections of our brothers and sisters in the union for future such fights. And I think that it's important to highlight that even though in that one campaign, the contract still got voted through, we had a lot of real successes and victories in the 2023 Vote No campaign. We were able to meet a number of militant fighters in shop floors across the country, bring them into the organization, and chart a path forward that positions Teamsters Mobilize as really the leading organized force in the Teamsters that is pushing for a union that serves not only our interests as current members of the Teamsters, but the working class as a whole. We can see the evidence of this influence, for example, in the New York City Labor Day parade that Colleen and I went to a few weeks ago, where Teamsters Local 808 had shirts that was modeled after our TM shirts and signs that said Local 808 versus the ruling class. We can see this in the strong stance that some of our brothers and sisters are taking and trying to run as opposition candidates in their own locals. And we can see this in the fact that TDU is trying to ban us from their convention. Like, they wouldn't be trying to do that if they didn't realize that we had something important to say that was going to resonate with their own members who already see the problems with the direction that the organization is taking. So there's a lot that we can build upon here. We're still a small group, but we have a lot of potential, and we have also taken some very important strides in the development of Teamsters Mobilize so far, and we're continuing to move forward. You know, like, we're not letting these bans knock us down. We're actually going to use that in order to expose the ways that TDU is actually trying to shut down democracy instead of fight for it. We're going to expose the way that Sean O'Brien is trying to fight more for the boss than he is for us. And we have a message that we do believe actually lies with the interests of our brothers and sisters in the Teamsters across the country and across the world. And we're going to keep standing for that. So this UPS contract and the current ways that we're seeing how our message ultimately did bear out in practice is only going to fuel that fire, is only going to support our fight, and is only going to keep driving our own conviction to march forward on the path ahead. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to share. And I hope that we can come out of this meeting with some more enthusiasm and conviction that what we're doing, it does make sense and it's not crazy, and we can accomplish it if we work together.
Thank you, Kit. All right, we're in our open period of discussions, so put your hands up if you have something you want to bring up about the contract, about TDU, about politics, whatever you want to talk about. We do ask that you try to keep it somewhat around the 3-minute mark so we can get as many people's opinions and thoughts in as possible. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate you guys on sticking together and continuing the fight over here. I think you're growing a solid group of young organizers. I think the contract's pretty obvious. It was sold to us. There was one vice president that stood up and said it wasn't a good contract. We won't call that guy out. But I think, yeah, the willful collaboration between TDU, who's acting basically like a bunch of capitalists to monopolize on the monies that are derived from Oz locals supporting them is a real problem, and we need groups like Teamsters Mobilize to be a springboard and a sounding board. So and obviously, we have Yvette and myself are running on the Fearless Together slate. And it's a tough uphill battle. Everybody sort of says we have no chance, but we got to fight that fight. And I don't think that that's the case. If anybody's interested in what we're trying to do over at the Fearless slate, contact me or Yvette, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you about ways that we can move it. Because Sean O'Brien's an existential threat to the labor movement, not just the Teamsters. But anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to throw. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm Wally. I'm a member of Teamsters Local 804, and I'm part of a labor committee to defend immigrants, mostly based in New York. Our perspective is to bring out the power of the working class, against the deportations. But about the TDU, it's not that the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, were once this healthy reform group that lost its way. From the outset, the TDU carried with it the perspective of, bringing in the capitalist courts and the boss's government into the union in order to clean house. What this meant was establishing federal control over our elections that then led to the removal of Ron Carey from the TDU, and also led to the ruining of our pensions. So it's not that we can't look to pressure or reform or recover the TDU, which has always held this perspective of looking to the boss's government to save the union. We need to fight for the political independence of our union. And thinking that the TDU will do anything else can only disorient members in our union. And then when it comes to a lot of like the crises that we're facing now in our union, when it comes to organizing Amazon, the TDU and the present union leadership, they look to the NLRB and so-called progressive Democrats to win workers' protections by legislative battles or certain rulings or whatnot. But what we really need is a class struggle fight that can mount mass picket lines that rely on the power of the working class, of the labor movement, and campaigns which champion the cause of immigrant workers and other workers who are being attacked at Amazon. When it comes to automation, we need to fight for union control over technology so that not a single job is lost to the boss's plans to automate. When it comes to the union in general, we need a class struggle program that fights against, all forms of social oppression and raises key transitional demands that link our daily struggles to a struggle for workers' power, to forge a workers' party and fight for a workers' government. We need to fight in our unions to take real action against things like imperialist war, the genocide in Gaza, and against mass deportations and police killings, right? So we can't content ourselves, with being critical of Sean O'Brien, but we need to actually organize committees in our workplaces and pass resolutions that commit the union as a whole to taking action against, these attacks on our fellow immigrant workers. And this is why in New York City we formed the labor committee to defend immigrants, to bring people out from across the labor movement to fight for real action to be taken against these deportations. But yeah, thanks for letting me speak.
Yeah, those are great remarks, Wally. I So I'm not a UPSer, but I did want to kind of draw a parallel with something that I've observed in the shop that I recently entered, which is it's like a 200 person unit. It's a food manufacturing warehouse in Brooklyn. Because I think that, I mean, like we always say, these problems are general in the union. They're not just UPS problems. They're not just UPS part-timer problems. So without going into too much of the details of the contract, we basically just had a 5-year contract get voted in. It was a very extremely concessionary contract. The workers actually voted it down against the will of the local leadership on the first round, and there was a concerted campaign by the local officials to um, kind of I don't know, do propaganda for the contract. And this contract is dog shit. Like, I mean, so the starting wage, actually, I say starting wage, the only rate of pay at this shop, a longtime Teamsters organized shop, is $16.80 an hour in New York City, one of the most expensive cities in the world. Um, and but this propaganda campaign by the officials was able to, and like them leveraging all the prestige of the Teamsters, even though it's a complete sellout and the local doesn't really do shit for anybody on the shop floor, like they were able to leverage all this kind of prestige and the whatever the weight of the union and the local to shove through this contract. And if they can do that with a contract that's as bad as that, this demonstrates the extent to which we have to be consistent in our messaging opposed to that, if that makes sense. So like we have to be out there like putting forward this message opposed to class collaboration and opposed to the sellouts every single day on the shop floor. We have to be putting out agitational materials related to every instance that we see where this manifests itself. Like we've started to do that a little bit with there was something we wrote for local 728, but like really we need to be doing that every time we see something on our shop floors in our local because that's the only way that we're going to be able to kind of push back against the weight of this dinosaur, this gigantic dinosaur that is the class collaborationist Teamsters leadership. So yeah.
Afternoon and good morning, brothers and sisters. I think we are in a very dark place in the Teamsters and in the labor movement and in the United States in general. There's so much I want to talk about, but maybe I can keep it sort of coherent and on the same track. So I want to go from sort of macro to micro. In the macro, we have an administration that is assaulting labor rights. The last Trump presidency, the right wing in this country executed a judicial coup that it's a slow rolling coup, and essentially what is happening is we are the frog that's being slow boiled. And since our rights are not all being stripped away immediately, they're being eroded just a little bit at a time. What we see is business as usual from our leadership and even from so-called rank and file organizations. With the destruction of the NLRB, we are going to be forced to turn inward if we cannot rely on the NLRB, which was probably a mistake from its creation, that labor surrendered its responsibility to the working class to a government entity. That was probably a big mistake to begin with. But with the erosion and eventual destruction of the NLRB, we will need to turn inward and rely on our own internationals and our own locals. And this should be both a call to action and also deeply disturbing given the misleadership class that is in charge of not just the Teamsters, but in charge of the entire labor movement. We have feckless so-called leaders that are really there to manage our dissent and to make it palatable for the company, because this is where they are going to get their pensions, their retirement plans, their golden parachutes, bronze parachutes. So let's take a look at the O'Brien administration. That the strategy is not to fight the Trump administration. The strategy is to beg the Trump administration, just not us, to go after public sector unions. Just not us. Please, not us. Please. We'll give money to Josh Hawley. We'll give money to whatever that ghoul's name is in Ohio. We'll pay. We'll bribe you. Please, just not us, right? And this is a throwing the rest of the labor movement under the bus, just to maintain, what little ground we have, so that the old guard can ride out until their retirements, and then they don't care what happens to us after that. And we can see this sort of attitude in our own workplaces. I know at UPS, part-timers are consistently thrown under the bus, and both contractually and on a day-to-day level. There's no solidarity. I'm a TCD at UPS, which means that I am a package car driver until they don't need me anymore, and then they throw me back on the part-time. So I have an interesting perspective, getting to see both sides of the conditions of work. And I have to tell you, both classifications are in survival mode right now, where people are just trying to make it through the day. We are all sort of just going through the motions while prices rise in our country, and while UPS cuts our hours, forces more work on us. And again, the slow boiling of the frog is not just happening nationally, it's happening in our own workplaces. So what we have to figure out what to do is how to raise the alarm, is how to snap people out of survival mode. Because if we're just defending, if we're just trying to survive, then we're not going to push anything forward unless we have an affirmative agenda to go out and tell people, we're not just against this. This is what we're for, which is why I encourage everybody to check out the vision that Teamsters Mobilize has put forward about the future. I'd just like to quote Antonio Gramsci as sort of a concluding thought. The old world is dying. The new world has yet to be born. Now is the time of monsters. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
But yeah, it makes no sense to me, right? How people fell for SOB. I mean, he had a long history of selling out the Teamsters members, and then I can't understand how TDU back in the day fought and got us the right to vote. Because of that, I was able to vote for Ron Kerry, and we struck UPS. He was the kind of leader that mobilized the membership. But when everything is said and done, we need to be organized from the bottom up, right? I mean, this is what we need to do for UPS. We need to start vote no, escalating contract campaign very early on. I mean, and right from the jump, we need to let them know, about the people that sold the contract to us last time. Whether it's the people the rank and file members that they put on the negotiating committee that were yes people. They made the videos, selling the contract. They signed non-disclosure agreements, and the only thing they were allowed to say, is like how great the negotiations go in selling the contract. And then the different people that make the YouTube videos that sold the contract to the people and whatnot. We need to let everybody know that from the beginning we need to vote no on the contract, because whatever they're going to come up with is going to sell us short. So that's what we need to do. Even if we get new leadership, we should always vote no, never accept the first offer, because eventually they'll get enough people to vote yes, and but it wouldn't be me, right? Because even in 1997, I found out after the fact that UPS had a better deal if we voted no, so I voted no ever since on the contract. So we need an escalating contract campaign. If we can get SOB out beforehand, that'd be great. They have them run out here, support, the people running, against SOB, but we can't, put our faith in, in leaders, right? We have to put our faith in ourselves. We need to organize from the bottom up, and we need to be organized. If we get a contract that's pushed on us, sold to us, whatever, we need to be organized to the point where, we can wildcat if necessary. If whoever is in the Marble Palace tries to push the contract on us. And thank you for your time.
Hi, now I was writing a few things down here. One thing I can say for our local 705, the contract, the effect immediately was kind of muted, because the big thing was that the part-timers got this big wage increase. We already got that. The negotiated rate at the time was $15.50. Nobody in Chicago was making $15.50. We're all making at least $20, because nobody around here, the cost of living is too high. Nobody's going to work for $15.50. So the effect on part-timers was we got $1 raise basically. So it just didn't grab a lot of attention for that reason. It didn't seem like a huge shift to most of us. Okay, I know that was not true in a lot of parts of the country, but that was true here. I wonder what people think about, people have pointed out that there's almost no protections against automation and that kind of stuff. I kind of doubt that's an oversight. I wonder if the IBT leadership just sort of accepts the plan to just automate most of us out of existence, and they're just willing to do it, I can't know that. I'm not privy to their conversations. Everything was, non-disclosure. We don't know. But I wonder how much they really care about that. And I just wonder what other people's thoughts are. The last thing I have, Will and Wally they use the phrases, the boss's government and not relying on that and that. I get that to a point. The one thing I would say, though, is that if your plan for pointing the union in the right direction is to get massive numbers of people, super militant forever, that's just really hard to do. There's going to be a hardcore of people who are going to be willing to be sort of full-time, lifelong militants, but they're a minority. You do need to, some way or other, you have to institutionalize some of these changes, like the ones that have been outlined on the platform, and kind of hardwire them in. Because mass mobilizations are great and they're necessary, but they kind of ebb and flow. They rise and they fall, and they rise and they fall. So we have to have structures that keep these things going even during periods where there isn't a whole lot of militancy, which will happen, So that's what I had. Thank you.
Yes, I just want to say a couple of things. One is that Teamsters Mobilize is part of the Boycott Home Depot coalition out here in Southern California, because they've been complicit in letting the Homelanders run around chasing undocumented workers or day laborers in their parking lots, or sometimes in their own stores. So I'm glad we're part of that out here in Southern California. And I'm also proud that Teamsters Mobilize was part of rebooting LA Labor for Palestine. Now it's it's Labor for Palestine in Los Angeles, Orange County, and Inland Empire, which are the three adjacent counties. So I just I'm just want to say I'm very glad that Teamster Mobilize understood that we need to be militant in the shop floor, but our struggle should not just be limited to the shop floor. Our struggles are in our communities and out here in the Southwest, and I'm figuring Chicago's experiencing, but hasn't experienced of what LA has experienced. That struggle is real, and I'm glad we're doing our part in that. And considering the now talking about the UPS contract, we talked about right now how the cost of living in certain areas are just way too high. Out here in Southern California, $21. There's a famous hamburger chain out here called In-N-Out. They start their employees off around either 19 or 22 an hour with benefits. I think McDonald's is up there to probably at $20 an hour. So that $21 was a smack to the face of all the part-timers, because I work in the twilight, so I seen them, loading, unloading, sorting, taking off bulk, picking off, and it's that $21 was a smack to our face. And then now considering automation, I know SOB has talked about how he wants a Teamster to be manning and fixing those automations equipment. And I guess Carol Tomei had a September 8th or 9th kind of interview where she talked about automation. She talked about the robotic arm. I think there's a hub in Texas that has a robotic arm that does the unloading. It's pretty slow, but technology, man is always able to advance technology and make it more efficient, and that's what's just going to happen. And we need to figure out what we're going to do with technology. Are we? I mean, we have to do some outside the box thinking. Right now, I do agree with Comrade Joe. Next year we have to start really thinking about the contract and really be thinking about changes to the UPS contract to benefit everybody. The 46 an hour, I think 46.58, that's a top driver rate out here in Southern California. It buys you it's not going to buy you a home. It's not what it used to be 20 years ago with at a driver's salary could afford to buy a home and be the only sole provider for his family or their family, excuse me. Now those days are long gone. So we have to find creative ways to uplift everybody in this next contract, because in my opinion, this next contract is the essential threat to our workforce, because the goal of UPS is to at least, for sure, is to bring down the numbers of the workforce. At the 2023 contract negotiations, we were at 340,000, so around there, members, and I'm sure UPS wants to cut that dramatically, if not in half, or probably more than half. So we really have to start thinking about our future, because I heard this podcast where supposedly Carol Tomei said that she doesn't want UPS to be seen as a long-term career. She sees UPS as that of FedEx, as that of Amazon. It's just a temporary stop to a different point, rather than what has been established is that UPS could be a career if you choose to make UPS a career, whether it's a package car driver, finding a combo job, getting a full-time inside job. So we have to start thinking really hard when it comes to this UPS contract, because we know that SOB will sell us down the drain. And I agree with Comrade Joe that we have to start organizing from the bottom up. It's cool to have leadership that listens and empathetic to our needs, but we can't be looking to our leaders. We have to look to ourselves and build some sort of militancy, even if militancy means educating the rank and file on their rights and what to do, so we could hopefully get to that point. Cool. And sometimes we'll have rank and file that won't get to that point of the militancy that we need. But as long as we engaging, as long as we're educating, and as long as we're empowering, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I appreciate being invited to this meeting. I'm in the Mechanics Union of Los Angeles, Amalgamated Transit Workers 1277. In line with what Wally said, and supplement to that, I think that it should be clear to militants in Teamster Mobilize that the historic gains that the Teamsters made, because of the 1934 strike was not despite the radicalism of the leadership in Minneapolis. It was in fact because of their radicalism. It was because they were inspired by the Bolsheviks and the Russian Revolution. It was not despite that fact. And the 1934 Teamsters achieved enormous gains. They built Minneapolis as like in the spirit of the Wobblies, as one big union. It broke down the divisions, organized workers' defense guards against fascistic attacks, the silver shirts. And this was all because they understood, like is seen in the documentary, of the question of independence of labor from the boss's state and the boss's political parties. They didn't take anything that the arbitrators said. I mean, look, James Cannon wrote about this in the history of American Trotskyism. I think it's lecture number 8. Also, there's a very important book that I've shared with Brother Jose, from Brian Palmer, Revolutionary Teamsters. All this stuff should be reviewed and debated out in Teamster Mobilize. And I feel privileged to be here with y'all. And it didn't mean that the Minneapolis Teamster leadership, Bolshevik Leninists that they were thinking of a long career in the leadership positions. As none of y'all, I imagine, think of yourselves as wanting to have a long career in the leadership, but to be in position, to push the working class, to be involved with the working class at the point of production, to try to make historic gains. There's going to be ebbs and flows in this struggle, but with a dedicated class analysis, historic gains can be made.
I guess I'd just like to add a few things. I just recently got to listen to the audiobook of Jane McAlevy's. There's a distinction that she makes between types of organizing. She talks about advocacy, she talks about mobilization, and she talks about deep organizing. And it's this idea of deep organizing that I would like to focus on. I'm going to try to go from sort of the macro to the micro. This Trump administration and the Supreme Court, they're in the sort of the foundation of federal bureaucracy that was built in response to large mobilizations, the labor rights movement, the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, and this edifice that these mobilizations forced the creation of, right? These federal protections that have been the law of the land for decades. The Trump administration, the Supreme Court, the Heritage Foundation, they are in the foundation swinging a sledgehammer against the load-bearing pillars of that foundation. They have broken things to the extent that just getting a Democrat back into power, even if that Democrat was somebody like Bernie Sanders or Tim Walz or one of these more social democratic minded Democrats, it's not nearly enough. That administration will not be able to put back what is hold on just a moment. Actually, go ahead and skip me for a second.
Yeah, comrades, thank you. Thank you for Teamster Mobilize for having this space for us to talk and debate the questions at hand at this moment in time right now. While we're no longer slipping into a fascist society, we are in one right now. And it's important for us to have these meetings and discuss these issues. First, I would like to talk to the people that are running for office right now that are here. I think the first order of business, if you do, win and take power, is you're going to have to go on a massive re-education campaign of the membership. We're going to have people outside the gates informing the members on the issues at hand at UPS and outside of UPS. That's number one. Because like I said, when I first started as a part-timer, there was an organizer outside of Soto Hub giving out leaflets of the convoy dispatch. That touched me. We need to start touching our members. We need to start giving the members the tools that they need in order to be an informed trade unionist. Because if you don't have the information, if you're letting, the bosses feed them the information, if you're letting the capitalist media feed them the information, they will never be, you will never win them over to your side, ever. That's the reason why we are in the mess that we're in right now, because the American worker is not educated whatsoever on the issues at all. If you talk to them, they know more about sports. They'll give you all the statistics in the world. When I talk to guys at work, that's what they know. And if I try to talk to them about politics, they look at me like if I'm an alien. That's the problem in this country. It's political education of the worker. In order to take power, you need it. So that's number one. The second thing I would like to say is job security. All right. How else do you build a fascist society? You take away their job security. Right now at UPS, for the first time in my life, as a 31-year package car driver veteran, I don't feel job security at all on my route. I don't. I just don't feel it, because what they're doing is, you could see it. I've been in this boat before. Once the bubble crashes, they're going to start tearing up routes. They already got the technology to scan the bulk stops, with one scan. They're ready. The technology's there. So to the package car drivers, that are here, or you can relay this to them, get ready, because your routes might not be there, especially with change of operations. If they changed your route over to another building, your route that you went with might be gone. You might be utility again. That is job insecurity. That is job. Why didn't we negotiate security for part-timers as well, and for package? I mean, you're building fascists, right? They're not going to have, that energy that they have pent up, because they no longer feel job security, right? They're going to start to vote against their own best interest. They're going to start to listen to, the fascists that are telling them, hey, you know what? Don't look at the boss that's doing this to you. Look at the immigrant. Look at the trans person. That person is the one that's taking away what you have. So it starts with education. We need a massive re-education campaign in the labor movement, especially with the Teamsters, because as you can see right now with Sean O'Brien, he's a fascist, he's a racist, and he's pointing the membership in the wrong direction. When we saw what happened with the Ohio Teamsters the other day, giving Vivek Ramaswamy, a self-hating man that wants to deport whole immigrant families, when he was running for president as well, the governorship, they endorsed that. Okay, so Ohio is not a right-to-work state. Well, get ready, Ohio. You might be a right-to-work state. And the Teamsters are pointing their members into Vivek Ramaswamy's hands. Not to mention, all the things that Sean O'Brien is doing on his podcast. All right, we already ran that down. His anti-immigrant, remarks and stuff like that. That's not helping the labor movement, man. We are destroying the labor movement as Teamsters. And what's left of us, we gotta get together, and we gotta fight back, and we gotta be loud, and we gotta do the right things. Because what's happening right now in our country, in the labor movement, it's not good, and we need to turn the ship around, because the vanguard against fascism is the labor movement. Period. Full stop. Thank you very much, comrades.
There were several good points made, and I think if you think about, like, you can fall into hopelessness pretty easily, but it really starts with one conversation, and just having that conversation over and over again with people. I was there when we won with Ron Carey. I traveled the country with him. I was there when we won 6 seats, and nobody thought, when TDU actually was part of that, and no one thought we could win. I do want to touch on something somebody else said earlier too, which we have to pay attention to. I do, in my heart of hearts, believe that Sean O'Brien, I'm just going to say this. I mean, I regularly argue with him in that boardroom. He has no soul. He doesn't give a shit about humanity. He's a pure politician. The idea that part-timers are dispensable and sort of separating us as through craft and class is fallacy also, because if you're a package car driver, they're trying to figure out a way to use drones and to manipulate the system, to use what's the little package system that they bought. I think they're even ready to dare us to go on strike next time. And if you're a feeder driver, a truck driver of any sort, which is what I did the majority of my life, you better believe they're already running these driverless trucks. And to sit on your hands and accept that and not at least have a plan or a thought about a plan and act like this just jumped on you is just totally irresponsible, and we need new leadership. I'm going to say one other thing too. I tried to post something, we're trying to get signatures to get on the ballot on our petition. I can't manage to post it on the page. Maybe Yvette can send it to you. But if you guys can get signatures to help us get on the ballot, we'd really appreciate that. We need 30,000 to get accredited. That gives us space in the magazine, and it also allows us access to the membership list, which would help us identify people of similar political persuasion that would help us move the vote our direction. So I don't mean to be a shameless politician, but I just do that plug in there. I think our position as a slate is very, very different than what Sean O'Brien's is. And I appreciate y'all giving me a little time to talk to you.
I was talking about the erosion of our hard-fought rights. This sort of speaks to Dennis's ebb and flow when he was talking about institutionalizing the type of militancy and pro-labor sentiment that we need. The flow was the labor rights movement, was the civil rights movement, was the women's rights movement, and it was the gay rights movement. It has ebbed, and in that ebb, largely the working class of the United States went back to sleep, right? They created these institutionalized guardians within the federal government, and those guardians gave the working class the ability and permission to go back to sleep, to be content that their rights were protected by the institutionalization of within the federal government. And those rights slowly have been eroded to the point where we sort of think we have these rights still, but really effectively we don't, right? On paper, we may have many of these rights, but the loopholes are not even loopholes at this point. It's Swiss cheese, our rights. The capitalist class goes through holes in these frameworks. They pass through them at will at this point. And at UPS, that same thing has happened. Our hard fought rights won in 94, in 97. Our hard fought rights as Teamsters in 1934, they have been eroded to the point where on paper we have some of these rights, but effectively our institutions are crippled. They're kneecapped in both knees. This is created sort of a false consciousness amongst the rank and file, where they don't think that there is a need for alarm. I think as Teamsters Mobilize, as militants within this union, our job is to take that ebb and flow to where when we flow higher than we were before. And when we don't ebb as low as we were before. So will everyone always be militant all the time? No. Will there be militants who are militant all the time? Hell yes, there will be. I'm one of them. The job of militants within this union, within the labor movement, is to grow that share of militants who will fight for the institutionalization of our militancy within institutions. It won't be the federal government. I'm going to tell you that right now. That is lost to us for decades. Potentially, we will have to change the entire form of this government to get back to simply a place where we care about humanity. But what we need to do is we need to go into our locals and we need to build that rank and file power and those militants who are there to mobilize the people in those times of flow. We need to have those militants who are there to fight for bylaws changes that take power away from the old guard, that push things like stewards councils, that push things like steward elections. That is the battle of inches that we are engaged in. And right now, we are dwarfed by the power of our adversaries, both within the union and the capitalist class. Their power is a leviathan, and so I would encourage everybody to think of themselves as a guerrilla fighter. And what you need to do on your shop floor is you need to find one person, two people, three people who are going to fight alongside you, and you need to figure out how you can hit and run both against our misleadership and against the company. And that battle of inches is, if we are all fighting that battle of inches, it adds up. I think we always need to be talking about the dire situation that we are in. You know, a few years ago when the UAW was striking, you heard about, ooh, the hot labor summer. Okay, none of this branding bullshit. We need to be honest about where we're at. But with that honesty, we also need to say, yes, we are up against a wall, but that means that we need to not surrender, not quit. We're up against that wall and we need to bare our teeth and fight back. So we have to thread that needle where we tell people how bad things are. And trust me, people know in their day-to-day lives. They're just afraid to admit it. They're afraid to, because giving it some credence, it makes it all the more real. But we need to make this crisis real, because that's the only way that we go forward in the fight is with an honest analysis of the situation. Please, brothers and sisters, don't give in to hopelessness, but also don't give in to false hope either.
To respond to what Will was talking about, I'm a member of course, the Teamsters, but I'm also a member of other group, radical, progressive, anarchist type groups. And the general consensus seems to be that if we're going to have to save ourselves, and it's going to probably look something like a general strike. And that is probably what I feel myself. This is my personal opinion. I feel like that's probably going to have to be the wave of the future for union members. Is we can't depend on the business unionism structure that has held up the union member for the unions for the last century. You're going to have to basically, if the boss is engaging in, is ordering you to do unsafe work, you're going to have, an unauthorized strike, walk off the job. We will be probably talking more about this. This seems to be the general consensus that I'm seeing, is that people are going to have to withhold their labor. That is what they can do to strike back against a fascist government. We've already been here too long. So I will mention that we are going to have several Teamster Mobilize folks at the TDU convention. We will be in the lobby. Brother Joe has already left, but we'll be with Brother Joe in the lobby. If any of you have not been banned yet, you are welcome to come by and say hello. And if you have been banned and you are in Chicago, you're welcome to come join us in the lobby for a visit. That's all I have. Thank you for being here. Solidarity.
Solidarity, y'all.
Solidarity.